I'm Dr. C, and welcome back to Dr. C Spills the Medical Tea, where I talk about how to get into medical school, being a doctor, and everything in between. So, today I want to talk about a little quick rounds for pre-meds. We're going to talk about the number one mistake that I see students making in writing their personal statement. So, let's go. So, what do you think the biggest mistake is? So, when I was a advisor at UCLA Prep, I used to review tons of applications and I used to help people formulate their personal statements. I also worked for Ingenious Prep as a senior advisor to help students who worked with the company to improve their applications. And so I was able to notice patterns among a lot of people. And so the biggest mistake that people make is that they are stuck in the observational uh, basically perspective. So they might talk about their experiences maybe with a family member who's sick or when they worked in a free clinic, but they sort of leave it at, I was working in a free clinic and I saw that a lot of patients had trouble with adhering to medications, and then they move on. So you're basically you're leaving money on the table when you do this, because what we want to see on the admissions committee is how reflective you are on those experiences. So for example, if you say, my dad was ill during the time that I was in undergrad, and we come from a Vietnamese family, and my dad couldn't read the labels on the medications. What we want to see, so that's an observation. We want to see depth. So from that, you would say, I noticed this barrier among a lot of immigrant families in the health fair that I worked at because of language barriers and also because of cultural differences in how people in my community go to the doctor, or how they ask questions, or how open they are about being vulnerable about pain and things that bother them. So what you're doing is you're basically noticing a broader pattern, and you're also taking it a little bit like outwards and saying, is this a community-wide problem? What are the things that could be going on? And then the next level that you would want to do on your statement is you want to link it to why you want to be a doctor and how you're going to impact that problem on a bigger scale. So for example, you would say, and then because I know that this was such an issue in my community, later when I volunteered at a health fair, I made sure that patients had language specific information on their medications that I would provide to them. Or later when I volunteered at a clinic overseas or in Mexico or whatever the case is, I would make sure that I knew basic cultural care for this community, how they viewed medications, how they viewed even time. Like, were they late to their appointments? Is it because they use the sun to tell time rather than a clock, which is the case for a lot of immigrant communities. So for you to make an observation and then bring it out and make a comment about how you as a doctor or even you as a student have worked to address this gap. And then the highest level is to say, I want to go to this particular med school or residency because I know that you have a lot of free clinics, and I want to get even better at addressing some of these cultural discrepancies. So do you see sort of how we worked it towards the past, reflection, pattern, bringing it out and looking at the bigger picture, and then you in the future, how you're going to work to address change in this particular issue. So that's usually what I would do as an advisor. I would help people take their observations in their life. Usually had to do with like illness. It may have to do with like people in your family, watching them suffer either through illness or maybe issues of access, maybe around beliefs around health or relationship to their bodies, and then help students draw on those experiences to create a very compelling story about why they want to be a doctor. So so I'll show you an example of how I did this. So when I was in medical school, I did let me take it back to undergrad. So when I was in undergrad, I used to volunteer for Flying Samaritans, and then also UCR. I wasn't a part of the UC San Diego program, but I would go to UCR just because they had the Flying Samaritans local chapter that would go to clinics in Mexico. And so I would attend their meetings, and so that I would be able to go. And so through volunteering in those clinics, I was able to see sort of like how resourceful that people that work in those settings have to be. Everyone from the translators, the medical students, the residents, the attendings. And so during those experiences, I journaled a lot. I was always sort of like writing down my experiences because I wanted to research them later and look at, okay, how many people in this community don't have access to like basic running water? How many of them are diabetic and they just aren't getting the medications that they need? What are the medications that we are able to provide, and how can we, what would, if we had to add one more medication, what would be the best medication to add? So I was always taking notes and trying to do research. And then when I went to apply on my application, I wrote down those experiences and how I would continue to build on them as a medical student and resident. And then when I was in medical school, I did a rotation in Peru where I worked in a hospital there, and I did the same thing. I wrote down my experiences. I really dug into what are the resources in this community, how many specialists are there, how come they don't have a basic ultrasound machine, what are the barriers to care. And so I was able to talk about those experiences when I applied to residency, and I wanted to work in a very resource poor setting because I wanted to, again, draw on my resourcefulness. I wanted to practice medicine for people that needed it the most. And so when I applied to UCSF Family Medicine, I was able to draw on all those principles and say, I want to continue to practice in a resource poor setting because I'm experienced in this. I know basically how to communicate with lots of different people to get things done. I know how to be assertive, and I want to create programs that will impact these patients and continue to learn about the specific diversity and different ethnic groups that are coming in with their own sort of conceptions of healthcare, conceptions of their bodies and everything like that, language barriers, etc. So I just wanted to give you an example of sort of the activities that I did, how I built upon those and reflected on it, and how I was able to package that into, and this is why I want to work with underserved communities. So it creates this thorough line of your experiences, your passions, and then your plans for the future. So my recommendation would be to journal. Whenever you're doing an experience, volunteering, even when you go on vacation, everything that you're experiencing is part of what you're going to take to offer to your future patients. So be sure you're writing down your experiences a lot, even the challenges, even maybe if you have a fallout in an organization, if you have struggles as a leader. These are all experiences that we want to hear about, the good and the bad, because really what we want to see is your reflection on it, not necessarily that you executed it perfectly every time. So the next question that I wanted to address is something that I get asked on Instagram a lot, which is a lot of students ask me, which activities should they do as a pre-med in undergrad? And I love this question because I remember as a pre-med, I felt so much pressure to do a ton of activities, to get started right away as a freshman. And the reality is that it's quality, not quantity. So as someone on the admissions committee, I want to see that you are actually creating meaning out of these experiences that you're doing. So the way that you can show this is that you are a part of less organizations, but for a longer period of time. So say you volunteer at, again, like a free clinic. Maybe they are open once a month. And so you are in this organization to staff a clinic once a month for maybe a year. After a year, you really need to be thinking about, how can I become more involved in the organization? So maybe take on a leadership role, a treasurer, president, and show that there's a specific topic that you're passionate about. Again, say it's medications, say it's staffing the clinic with doctors and residents, say it's patient retention or materials that you give to patients when they leave so they understand their medication directions. So take on one passion that you have and implement a project. Follow the course in terms of implementation, why you chose to implement it this way, what your successes were, what the process was like. Did you have any help? What team did you build? All of that experience is going to be super helpful to talk about on your applications, in your interviews, and also will inform your own choices about why you're passionate about medicine. So bigger impact you can make in one organization is going to be way better than, say, doing 3 or 4 activities over the same amount of time. So, and then we do want to see that at least one of your activities is health related, because a lot of people get into medicine and they don't even realize what doctors do day to day. So we want you to get your hands dirty in clinic. You know, I was a volunteer in a hospital, and a lot of times all I did was bring patients water. I would sit with them and talk to them. I would help the nurse change bed sheets, and I did this for 3 years. And what it really showed me is that every person on the care team matters, and that you really do need to sort of start at the basic level of just taking care of people in order to work up to creating care plans and writing medications. If you don't love the patient care aspect of it all, you're probably not going to enjoy med school and residency. I'll just be honest. So make sure you get time in the clinic, get time in the hospital, spend time with doctors and nurses. And I remember a lot of people that I went to school with, they did this and then they realized, I don't really want to be the doctor. I really want to be a PA because of what PAs do day to day. They don't need to go to school for as long, but they still have a lot of the same impact on patients. And some people said, I want to be a nurse. Actually, I don't want to be the doctor. I enjoy what the nurse does day to day a lot more. So be sure that you know exactly the day to day of being a doctor and if that's for you. So again, be sure you're reflecting, writing, and know that it's okay to change your mind, but you just have to get out there and volunteer and work and have all of the experiences so that you can make a better decision about if you do want to be a doctor and why, and that you're able to talk about that. So I hope all of this helps. If you have other questions related to what I've talked about, please send me a DM. I'm on Instagram at Dr. Chantal Lunderville. And be sure to like and subscribe to this video and my channel, and you can leave me any comments with any of your own experiences that you'd like to share.